The theater buzzed with anticipation. Bright spotlights swung across the vast audience, brushing against eager faces and glittering banners that fans held high. America's Got Talent had always been a stage of surprises, an arena where the extraordinary and the unexpected could collide in an instant. Some came with dazzling costumes, others with jaw-dropping tricks. The audience never quite knew what would happen when that curtain rose, but tonight, no one could have guessed what was about to unfold. The judges sat in their familiar row, each with their own ritual. Sofia Vergara leaned forward with her signature warmth ready to be delighted. Heidi Klum adjusted her mic, her smile glowing under the stage lights. Howie Mandel scanned the audience, tossing a few waves at familiar fans. But it was Simon Cowell who looked the most guarded, arms folded, his sharp gaze fixed on the stage as if already preparing for disappointment. After years of auditions, he had heard everything, from the heartbreakingly good to the painfully bad. The music faded out, and the announcer's voice boomed. Next up, all the way from the Philippines, please welcome Matteo. The curtain parted. Out stepped a boy, small, frail-looking, maybe 10 or 11 at most. His clothes were neat but plain, a white button-up shirt tucked into oversized black pants that bunched around his ankles. He clutched a simple wooden cane in his right hand, tapping lightly as he felt for the edge of the stage. His other hand reached out cautiously until a stagehand gently guided him to the center. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Whispers rippled across the theater. Is he blind? Someone whispered. Is this safe? Another murmured. Simon raised an eyebrow, his usual mask of skepticism softening just a touch. Something about the boy's small frame, his careful steps, his trembling hands clutching the microphone, made the room quieter than usual. Finally the boy raised his chin. His eyes, though open, didn't focus on anything. They stared into a world unseen. And yet, there was no shame in his posture. He gripped the microphone with both hands, drew in a shaky breath, and began to speak. My name is Matteo, he said, his voice trembling but clear. I am 10 years old. His accent was gentle, soft around the edges, carrying the lilt of his homeland. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then Sofia leaned forward, smiling warmly. Hello, Matteo! And what will you be doing for us today? The boy took another breath. His lips quivered as though the words weighed more than his small body could carry. I will sing, because music is the only way I can see the world. There was no sound in the room after that, just a stillness that seemed to stretch into eternity. The audience, once buzzing, now sat frozen. A woman in the front row instinctively pressed her hands to her chest, her eyes glistening. Simon tilted his head, his arms once folded, now rested on the table as if to catch every word. Matteo shifted nervously, tapping his cane once against the stage before setting it down by his side. His free hand brushed across the microphone stand as if memorizing its shape. From backstage, a woman's voice whispered softly, "You can do this, Anik." His mother's encouragement. She stood hidden in the wings, her hands trembling as she clutched a worn handkerchief, the same one her son had given her years ago after his first little street performance. The spotlight now focused solely on Matteo, illuminating his small figure in a pool of gold. The vast stage around him seemed almost too big for his presence, yet somehow the emptiness emphasized his bravery. A child blind and fragile, standing before thousands, facing not just the judges, but the world. He licked his lips nervously, leaning close to the microphone. His voice came out in a soft whisper meant more for himself than the crowd. Please, can you play the music? The sound engineer nodded, pressing a button. A gentle piano introduction flowed into the air, wrapping the theater in a calm stillness. Matteo's fingers tightened around the microphone. His small chest rose and fell, the way it always did when he sang in the tiny living room back home, barefoot, the scent of his mother's cooking lingering in the air. The judges leaned forward. The audience held their breath. Somewhere in the back of the theater, a child hushed their restless sibling. Cameras zoomed in on Matteo's face, those unfocused eyes, those trembling lips, and for a brief, delicate moment, time seemed to stop. Before a single note left his mouth, everyone in the theater already knew they were about to witness something unforgettable. Not because of pity, not because of the cane at his side, but because of the sheer courage radiating from a small boy, who had walked into the world's brightest stage armed with nothing but his voice. The air crackled with the tension of possibility. Simon Cowell leaned forward, hands clasped together, his piercing eyes fixed on Matteo. He didn't smile, not yet, but the skepticism had melted away. Instead, his gaze carried something rarer, something deeper, hope. And then, Matteo opened his mouth to sing. The piano chords floated into the air, soft and deliberate, like the first rays of dawn spilling over a quiet horizon. The crowd leaned in. Some people already had their hands over their mouths, as though bracing for something that would either break their hearts or heal them. Matteo stood perfectly still at the center of the stage, clutching the microphone so tightly his knuckles turned white. His eyelids fluttered once, then relaxed. He tilted his head slightly upward, as though listening to a secret melody only he could hear, and then, with a deep breath that seemed to come from a place far older than his 10 years, he began to sing. The first note was fragile, no louder than a whisper, Yet it cut through the silence like a spark in the dark. His voice trembled for just a second, then found its footing. Suddenly, the sound swelled, filling the cavernous theater with something so pure, so unexpected, that the audience collectively gasped. It wasn't just a child's voice, it was an instrument of emotion, carrying weight, carrying truth. The judges froze. Sophia's mouth fell open, her eyes wide with disbelief. Heidi pressed a hand to her chest as though steadying her heartbeat. Howie leaned forward, his usual smile gone, replaced by awe. Simon, known for his unshakable composure, sat back in his chair, lips parted, his eyes flickering with something he hadn't felt in years, wonder. Matteo's voice rose higher, each note ringing with clarity, every word dripping with a sincerity that no training, no vocal coaching, could ever produce. He wasn't just singing a song, he was giving the audience a window into his soul. Every lyric carried his struggles, his dreams, his unspoken prayers. The boy's small body swayed slightly with the rhythm, his hands trembled against the microphone, but his voice grew steadier with each passing moment. It was as if, once he began, the world around him disappeared, the judges, the cameras, the massive stage, all gone. All that remained was him, the music, and the invisible universe he painted with sound. By the second verse, the audience was transformed. Some closed their eyes, letting the voice wash over them like a tide. Others clasped their hands together, unable to believe what they were witnessing. A few began to cry quietly, their tears catching the glow of the stage lights. From backstage, his mother's sobs could be heard, soft, but unmistakable. She clutched her handkerchief, whispering prayers of gratitude. To her, this was more than an audition, it was proof that her son, blind since birth, could still illuminate the world with a gift far brighter than sight. Simon leaned in, resting his chin on his hand, studying the boy like a man desperate to memorize every detail of a miracle unfolding before him. He wasn't just listening to music, he was remembering something. The way the boy sang with such raw emotion stirred something deep inside him, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. It was as though the walls he had built, brick by brick, around his heart were being dismantled by each soaring note. Matteo's voice soared higher, the power shocking for someone so small. It was unpolished, yes, but it was real. That authenticity pierced straight into the hearts of everyone in the room. The imperfections made it perfect, reminding the audience that beauty isn't about flawless performance. It's about truth, vulnerability, and courage. The camera panned across the audience, capturing faces streaked with tears. Some clutched their chest, others stood slowly from their seats, as if pulled upward by something beyond themselves. The air was heavy, not with noise but with feeling, raw, collective, undeniable. Halfway through the song, Matteo hit a note that seemed impossible, his voice cracking with emotion. Instead of faltering, he leaned into it, letting the crack become part of the story. That imperfection became the moment people would never forget. Because it wasn't about technical skill, it was about humanity. By now the crowd could no longer sit still. Whispers of, "Oh my God," and, "Listen to him," echoed throughout the theater. A few audience members raised their phones instinctively, but most didn't dare. They didn't want to miss a second of experiencing it live. Even the stage crew, usually numb to endless auditions, stood frozen backstage, staring at the boy with tears in their eyes. One cameraman adjusted his lens, but his hands shook so badly the image blurred. And Matteo, he remained in his world of sound. Blind to the tears, the awe, the standing audience. For him, the music wasn't a performance, it was a prayer. It was the way he touched the colors of a world he couldn't see. Every lyric was a brushstroke, every note a light that painted the darkness inside him with beauty. The bridge of the song arrived, the moment of greatest intensity. The boy's chest rose and fell rapidly, but his voice rose like a flame, flickering, unyielding, consuming the silence. It was no longer just singing, it was a cry, a declaration, a plea to be heard. The audience erupted into applause mid-song, clapping and cheering, unable to contain themselves. Normally such interruptions broke a performer's concentration, but Matteo didn't flinch. He couldn't see the crowd leaping to their feet, couldn't see the tears streaming down the judges' faces. All he knew was the music, and the belief that if he sang with all his heart, someone, somewhere, would feel less alone. As the final verse approached, the piano softened. Matteo's voice dropped to a whisper again, tender and fragile, as though he were singing a lullaby to the world. Every syllable trembled with vulnerability. His small fingers loosened their grip on the microphone, as if surrendering his song to the heavens. Then came the final note. It stretched long and true, vibrating through every corner of the theater. People held their breath, afraid even to blink, as if a single sound could break the sacredness of the moment. The note hung in the air, glowing, shimmering, then faded into silence. For a heartbeat there was nothing. No clapping, no cheering, just stunned silence. The kind of silence that only follows greatness. The silence of thousands of people trying to process what they've just experienced. Matteo lowered his head slightly, unsure of what had happened, unable to read the room. He whispered softly into the microphone, barely audible, "Thank you." And in that instant, like a dam breaking, the theater exploded into cheers. The audience leapt to their feet, roaring, clapping, crying, shouting his name. The applause rolled like thunder, shaking the very walls of the building. The boy stood there unaware of the confetti that was soon to fall, unaware of the tears streaming down Simon's face. All he knew was that for the first time in his life, his voice had been heard, not just by a room full of strangers, but by the world. He had sung his truth, and in doing so, he had stopped time. As Meteo's voice filled the auditorium, something remarkable happened. His words, delivered with such purity and conviction, did more than just entertain. They began to awaken memories, both in the audience and in those who knew him best. For his mother, watching from backstage with trembling hands, every lyric was a mirror reflecting the hardships and triumphs of their journey. She stood in the shadows, her fingers clutching a worn handkerchief. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered to herself, "That's my son, that's my boy." The judges and audience saw a child with a gift, but she saw every moment that had led to this one. The memories came rushing back like a tide. She remembered the day Mateo was born, how tiny he was, his fists curled tightly as if clinging to life. At first everything seemed normal, until weeks later when she noticed his eyes didn't follow her movements. She would wave a hand in front of his face, clap gently, move toys side to side, but his gaze never shifted. Fear crept in, then dread, and finally the diagnosis: her son was blind. She had cried for nights, rocking him in her arms, whispering apologies he could never understand. "I'm sorry, Anak. I'm so sorry, the world will be hard for you." Yet as he grew, she realized her fears underestimated him, for while Mateo could not see, he had ears sharper than most, and a heart that seemed to sense things others missed. She remembered the mornings when the sun baked their small wooden home in the Philippines, and Mateo's laughter would echo through the rooms as he sang along to the radio. He didn't know the world's colors, but he painted their little home with sound. Music became his window. Each song was a landscape, each melody a sunrise or a sea. When his father left, unable to bear the weight of poverty and responsibility, Mateo was only 6. His mother tried to shield him from the heartbreak, but the boy sensed it anyway. That night, she sat at the kitchen table with her face buried in her hands, weeping silently. Then, through the darkness, she heard a soft hum. Mateo had climbed onto a chair beside her, patting her arm awkwardly, whispering, "Don't cry, Mama, I'll sing for you." And he did. His small, shaky voice carried a song that wasn't perfect, but it was enough to soothe her breaking heart. From then on, music wasn't just his passion, it became their lifeline. Back on the AGT stage, Mateo's voice carried those same emotions. He sang not just for the judges or the audience, but for every night he had sung his mother to sleep when she thought she couldn't go on. Each lyric seemed to say, "We survived. We're still here." The audience, though unaware of his full story, felt it. They didn't need to know the details to recognize the weight behind his words. His tone carried loneliness, but also resilience. His phrasing held sorrow, but also hope. Even those who had never faced poverty or disability felt their hearts pulled into his world. In the middle of the performance, as the lights bathed him in a soft glow, another memory stirred. It was of the streets of Manila, where Mateo would sometimes sing near the marketplace. His mother would sit beside him, holding a small basket where passersby could drop coins. He would sing not to beg but because music was all he had to offer. Sometimes, strangers paused, surprised by the sound that came from such a small child. They would smile, clap, and give what little they could. Those moments had kept food on their table. And now here he was, on one of the biggest stages in the world, singing not for coins but for something greater. For dignity, for a chance, for a future. From the judges' table, Simon blinked rapidly, his face betraying an emotion he rarely showed. He had seen thousands of singers come and go, many with polished voices, but what struck him now wasn't perfection, it was truth. Every note Mateo sang seemed to carry the entire history of his young life, as if his soul were pouring out through the microphone. The audience could sense it too. A woman in the crowd covered her mouth, whispering, "That boy has lived more in 10 years than most of us have in a lifetime." As Mateo's song swelled into its climax, his mother's memories collided with the present. She saw her son as a little boy again, singing in the dim glow of a kerosene lamp, his voice soft and sweet, promising her that things would get better. She saw him clutching her hand as they boarded the plane to America for the first time, his excitement and fear woven together. She remembered him whispering at the airport, "Mama, do you think they'll like my singing?" Her answer had been simple. "If they have a heart, they will love you." And now, as the golden stage lights rained down on her boy, she realized her words had been more than just encouragement, they had been prophecy. Mateo's small chest heaved as he poured every ounce of breath into the song's final chorus. The words weren't just lyrics anymore, they were his story, his promise to the world. "Even if I cannot see the light, I will be the light." The audience erupted in applause mid-song, unable to contain their emotion. Strangers wiped their tears, families gripped each other's hands, some whispered prayers of gratitude for being reminded of what truly mattered. Backstage, his mother whispered too, only this time, it wasn't an apology. It was a prayer of pride. "Thank you, Lord, thank you for giving him this gift. For the first time, she wasn't just the mother of a blind child struggling to survive. She was the mother of a boy whose voice had the power to move the world. And as the song drew to a close, every heart in the theater knew one thing: this wasn't simply an audition. This was the unveiling of a soul. The final note of Mateo's song lingered in the air, long and trembling, like a prayer hanging between earth and heaven. Then silence. It wasn't the kind of silence born of uncertainty, nor the restless hush of polite waiting. It was sacred, a silence so deep, so heavy, that every person in the theater held their breath as though afraid to shatter the moment. The boy stood motionless, hands still gripping the microphone. His chest rose and fell rapidly. His small face turned upward, waiting. He couldn't see the crowd on their feet, but he could feel the weight of their silence pressing in around him. Then, in the quiet, he whispered softly, barely audible into the microphone, "Thank you." That was all it took. The dam burst. The theater erupted into thunderous applause, the kind that rattled the floor and rose like a tidal wave. People jumped to their feet, clapping, cheering, shouting his name. Some screamed, some cried openly. The sound of thousands of hands and voices blended into one deafening roar of love and awe. From backstage, his mother sobbed into her handkerchief, her knees nearly buckling beneath her. She wanted to run out to hold her son, but she knew this was his moment. Her tears fell freely as she whispered again and again, "Salamat, Salamat, thank you." The judges were on their feet too. Sophia's eyes sparkled with tears as she clapped, shouting, "Bravo, Mateo." Haiti pressed her hand against her chest, her lips trembling as though she had no words left. Howie clapped so hard his palms turned red, shaking his head in disbelief. And Simon Cowell sat in silence for a moment longer than the rest. His eyes were glassy, and though he tried to hide it, one tear slipped down his cheek. He quickly brushed it away, but the cameras had already caught it. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly as if trying to regain control. But when his gaze returned to the boy standing so small and alone on the massive stage, something in him shifted. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned forward, pressing his hand against the golden button in front of him. Boom! The buzzer lit up with a blinding glow, and a powerful sound filled the theater. The audience screamed louder, voices blending into a symphony of joy. Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling, raining down like 1,000 falling stars. The lights spun in celebration, showering the stage in gold. Mateo flinched at the sudden noise, his small hands lifted instinctively, reaching out as glitter fell against his skin. Confetti stuck to his hair, to his shirt, to the cane he held loosely by his side. He turned his face upward, his eyes blank but glowing, as though trying to imagine what this golden storm looked like. Confused, he whispered into the microphone, "What's happening? Why is everyone shouting?" A stagehand rushed forward, gently guiding his free hand upward, letting him catch a handful of confetti. The thin paper brushed his fingertips. He crumpled it gently, then smiled, the kind of smile that radiated innocence and wonder. "Mateo," the stagehand whispered, barely holding back tears, "this is the golden buzzer. You're going straight to the live shows." The boy's mouth opened in astonishment. His smile widened, filling his small face with a light that seemed to outshine the stage itself. He clutched the golden confetti in his fist, holding it like treasure. Then, with a trembling voice, he asked the question that would break the hearts of everyone listening. "Is this what gold looks like?" The crowd gasped, and then, as if on cue, they roared even louder. People cried openly, hugging each other. Even the hardest hearts in the room softened. The innocence in his words cut deeper than any lyric ever could. Simon stood now, clapping slowly, deliberately, until the other judges joined him. When the cheering dimmed enough for him to speak, he leaned forward, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Mateo," he said, pausing as though choosing every word carefully, "I don't think I've ever been more moved by a performance in my life. You didn't just sing, you didn't just perform. You gave us hope, and I'll tell you something." He cleared his throat, trying to steady his voice. "You have just reminded us all why we love music, why we love this show, and why we believe in miracles." The audience clapped and shouted in agreement, stamping their feet. Mateo listening closely, tears finally forming at the corners of his unseeing eyes. "Mateo," Simon continued, "you may not be able to see the world, but you just showed the world how to see you. And we are better for it." The boy smiled, holding the microphone close to his lips, and whispered, "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." Sophia was still crying. "You are an angel," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "A true angel sent to us." Heidi added, "I think tonight, every person in this room will remember that they witnessed something bigger than a talent show. You touched our hearts, Mateo." Howie, usually quick with jokes, was uncharacteristically serious. "Sometimes I say this as a judge, but tonight I say this as a human being. Thank you for reminding us of the power of the human spirit." The audience roared again, chanting his name.
Mateo!
Mateo. Golden confetti continued to fall as Mateo reached down, scooping a handful and holding it tightly in both hands. He pressed it against his chest as though it were a medal, A trophy, a dream made real. Backstage, his mother finally couldn't contain herself. She ran forward, tears streaming, and wrapped her arms around him. The audience melted at the sight, mother and son, holding each other in a storm of gold. He buried his face in her shoulder and whispered, "Mama, they liked me, they really liked me." She kissed his hair and sobbed, "No, Anak, they didn't just like you, they loved you." The audience, watching this embrace, erupted once more, clapping and cheering not just for the boy's talent, but for his courage, his journey, and the love that had carried him here. As the golden confetti continued to drift down like blessings from the heavens, one truth became clear to everyone in the room: this was more than an audition. This was a turning point. A blind Filipino child had just shaken the AGT stage, and in doing so, reminded the world that greatness isn't defined by what we see, but by what we choose to believe. And tonight, everyone believed in Mateo. The stage was still awash in gold. Confetti drifted lazily down like flakes of sunlight, catching in Mateo's hair, sticking to his shirt, covering the stage in shimmering patches. The roar of the audience hadn't lessened, it rolled on in waves, crashing and receding only to rise again. People stood on their chairs, clapping, shouting his name as if calling for an encore from a boy who had already given them everything he had. Mateo clutched the microphone in one hand, the golden paper pressed tightly to his chest with the other. His mother stood beside him now, holding his shoulders as if anchoring him to this surreal reality. She was crying, but these weren't the tears of worry or exhaustion she'd shed so many nights in their tiny home back in the Philippines. These were tears of pride, of relief, of dreams come true. For Mateo, though, the moment was both overwhelming and oddly quiet. He couldn't see the thousands standing in front of him. He couldn't see the confetti painting the air, but he could feel it, the vibration of the applause beneath his feet, the tremor of the stage from so many stomping, the warmth of the lights above. He tilted his head, smiling faintly, as if trying to memorize every sensation. Simon Cowell leaned forward again, this time softer, his voice carrying through the microphone. "Mateo, I want you to listen carefully. Tonight, you didn't just get a golden buzzer, you gave us a golden moment. This wasn't about pity, it wasn't about a story. This was about your gift. You showed us that sometimes the purest vision doesn't come from the eyes, it comes from the heart." The audience clapped in agreement, some shouting, "Yes!" as if it were church. Simon continued, his voice catching slightly, "You've changed this stage forever. And I promise you, people all over the world are going to remember this night." Mateo's lips trembled as he leaned into the microphone. "Thank you, sir. I just wanted to make people happy. I wanted them to feel what I feel when I sing." The innocence of that statement struck everyone harder than any dramatic performance ever could. He hadn't come for fame, for money, or even for validation. He had come to share joy, to give a gift, and in that moment it was clear his gift had been received. Backstage, crew members wiped their eyes. The cameramen struggled to keep steady shots as tears blurred their vision. The judges too were visibly shaken. Sophia clasped her hands together as if in prayer. Heidi whispered something under her breath, her eyes glistening. Howie wiped his face and muttered, "This kid, he's going to change lives." The audience slowly quieted, but the emotion in the air remained electric, almost tangible. Parents held their children tighter, strangers reached for tissues, and millions watching from home felt something stir within them, a reminder of resilience, of hope, of the beauty of the human spirit. Mateo, still holding his mother's hand, tilted his face toward the ceiling. "Mama," he whispered, his voice barely audible to the microphone, I think I can hear the light." His mother gasped, pressing her lips against his hair. "Yes, Anak, you are the light." The crowd roared once more, the words piercing through every heart in the room. They weren't just lyrics now. They weren't just words, they were truth. The stage lights dimmed slightly as the cameras zoomed out, capturing the image that would be replayed across the world: a small blind boy, standing in a storm of gold, holding his mother's hand as if holding the whole world, while thousands stood in reverence before him. From that moment, Mateo was no longer just a contestant. He was a symbol, a reminder that greatness is not measured by what you have, but by what you give. He had given everything: his voice, his heart, his story, and in return, he had ignited something larger than himself. The weeks ahead would bring interviews, headlines, and viral clips. The video of his performance would be shared millions of times, translated into languages he couldn't understand, reaching countries he had never even heard of. Strangers would write messages of love and encouragement. "You gave me hope today. You reminded me of what really matters. My son is blind too, and now he believes he can chase his dreams." But none of that was on Mateo's mind that night. Standing there on the stage, the applause still ringing, all he could think was that he had kept his promise. The promise he made to himself as a little boy singing in the dark, to use his voice to light the way. Simon's words echoed in the air, "You didn't just sing, you gave us hope." And as the final golden confetti drifted to the floor, one truth settled over the theater like a blessing: sometimes the greatest vision comes from those who cannot see. Sometimes the brightest light comes from those who live in darkness, and sometimes, the smallest voice can shake the biggest stage, and remind the world of the power of kindness, courage and love. The crowd's cheers swelled once more as Mateo raised his fistful of confetti high, his face radiant. He couldn't see the golden glow raining around him, but he didn't need to. He was already shining brighter than anyone else. And so, a blind Filipino child with nothing but his voice had not only earned a golden buzzer, he had given the world a golden moment, one that would echo far beyond the stage. Because in the end, it wasn't just his voice that shook the AGT stage, it was his light.